My name is Valentina. And this is how I exposed 26 years of lies with a single envelope. At my own wedding, my mother smiled sweetly and said, "You don't mind if Linda takes the car, right? It suits her better anyway." She was talking about the custom luxury vehicle my new in-laws had gifted me, titled in my name, worth more than most people's houses. My sister Linda giggled, already sliding her manicured fingers along the keys like she owned them. "Thanks, Val. You know I deserve nice things more than you do." The audacity was breathtaking. But what they didn't know was that 3 weeks earlier, I discovered something that shattered my entire world. I wasn't their daughter. I was their meal ticket. 26 years ago, they'd taken me in after my real parents, their wealthy relatives, died in a car crash. They'd been stealing from the trust fund my biological parents left me, using my inheritance to fund Linda's perfect life while telling me I was lucky they kept me at all. From my purse, I pulled out a thick white envelope. Not just car documents, but DNA results, trust fund statements, and adoption papers they thought I'd never find. "Actually, there's something I need to share before anyone leaves," I said, my voice cutting through the champagne-soaked air like a blade. The room fell silent as I opened the envelope slowly, deliberately. Inside were documents that would destroy their carefully constructed lies in front of 200 witnesses. "Funny thing about family," I said, my smile colder than winter. "Sometimes the people who claim to love you are the ones robbing you blind." Linda's face went white. My fake mother's champagne glass trembled in her hand. Because that envelope didn't just contain paperwork. It contained proof of the biggest con in our family's history. Have you ever discovered your entire life was built on lies? Comment "betrayed" if you're ready for this truth. Because what I revealed next destroyed them completely. To understand the magnitude of their deception, you need to know who I thought I was versus who I actually am. I grew up believing I was the unwanted accident, the daughter who came too late, loved too little and cost too much. Every birthday, every achievement, every moment of joy was shadowed by the constant reminder that I should be grateful for their sacrifice in raising me. "We didn't have to keep you," became their favorite weapon. Whenever I asked for anything, school supplies, clothes that fit, permission to join activities, the response was always the same. "Do you know how much you cost us?" Other families would have given up by now. I believed them. How could I not? When you're told from childhood that you're a burden, you learn to make yourself as small as possible. I worked part-time jobs from age 14, not for spending money, but to contribute to the household and prove I was worth keeping. Linda, meanwhile, lived like a princess. Private school, designer clothes, family vacations I wasn't invited on because someone needs to watch the house. I told myself it was because she was younger, more fragile, more deserving of protection. The truth was so much darker. What I didn't know was that my real parents, Marcus and Isabella Rosewood, had been successful art dealers who died when I was 6 months old. They'd left me everything: a multimillion-dollar trust fund, property investments, and a collection of artwork worth more than most people see in a lifetime. The people I called Mom and Dad, Patricia and Robert Chen, were actually my father's distant cousins. They'd volunteered to take me in, promising the courts they'd love me like their own daughter and manage my inheritance responsibly until I turned 25. Instead, they'd been systematically draining my trust fund for 26 years. Every designer bag Linda carried, my money, every family vacation I was excluded from, funded by my inheritance. Every time they made me feel guilty for existing, they were gaslighting the child whose wealth was paying for their lifestyle. The cruelest part wasn't the theft, it was the psychological manipulation. They'd convinced me I was worthless while living off my worth. They'd made me grateful for scraps while feeding Linda banquets bought with my birthright. I discovered the truth 3 weeks before my wedding, purely by accident. Daniel and I were applying for a mortgage when the bank flagged an unusual credit report. There were accounts in my name I'd never opened, properties I'd never seen, and a trust fund I'd never known existed. The paper trail led me to a lawyer who'd been trying to contact me for years, blocked by the very people who claimed to protect me. He had boxes of documents. My real parents' will, trust fund statements, even letters they'd written to me before they died. Letters Patricia and Robert had hidden for 26 years. That's when I realized my entire life had been a lie designed to steal my future. And my wedding day was about to become their reckoning. The lawyer's office smelled like old leather and broken promises. Mr. Harrison had been trying to reach me for 8 years. Every letter intercepted, every call blocked by the people I trusted most. "Your parents left you everything," he said, sliding documents across his mahogany desk. "The trust was supposed to transfer to your control at 25. That was last year." My hands shook as I read the numbers. $4.2 million in investments, 3 properties, an art collection valued at $1.8 million. All of it mine since birth. All of it stolen by the people who'd convinced me I was worthless. "Where did the money go?" I whispered. He pulled out bank statements that made my stomach turn. Monthly withdrawals for Valentina's care and education, except I'd never seen a penny. Private school tuition for Linda. Luxury cars registered to Patricia and Robert. A vacation home in Tuscany I'd never heard of. They'd been living like royalty on my inheritance while making me work minimum wage jobs to build character. The psychological records were worse. Court documents showed they'd told social services I was emotionally disturbed and needed intensive family support, justifying larger withdrawals from my trust. They'd painted me as damaged goods to steal more money. "There's more," Mr. Harrison said gently. "Your biological parents left letters for you. One for each birthday until you turned 18. 18 letters I'd never received. 18 years of love from parents I'd never known, intercepted by people who'd convinced me I was unwanted." I opened the first one with trembling fingers. "My darling Valentina, if you're reading this, it means we're not there to celebrate your first birthday with you. But know that every breath you take, every smile you give, every dream you chase, it all carries our love. You are not an accident. You are not a burden. You are our greatest masterpiece. And whoever is caring for you is blessed beyond measure to witness your light." I sobbed in that lawyer's office, mourning parents I'd never known while grieving the childhood that had been stolen from me. Every cruel word, every moment I'd felt unwanted, every time I'd been made to feel grateful for basic care, it was all built on lies designed to justify theft. But the cruelest discovery was yet to come. "There's one more thing," Mr. Harrison said. "Linda isn't their biological daughter either." My blood turned to ice. "What?" "She was adopted 6 months after you arrived. But unlike your situation, her adoption was unofficial. No legal papers, no court oversight. They essentially bought her from a teenage mother who couldn't afford to raise her." The room spun. "Why?" "Because they needed a control group. A child to lavish attention on while neglecting you. It made the psychological abuse more effective and justified larger, therapeutic withdrawals from your trust. Linda wasn't my sister. She was a prop in their elaborate con game. A living, breathing reminder of what I could never have, purchased specifically to make me feel worthless while they spent my inheritance on her happiness. Every birthday party I'd watched from the sidelines. Every family photo I'd been excluded from. Every moment of love and attention she'd received. It was all theater, funded by my money, designed to break my spirit so completely that I'd never question their authority. The wedding planning suddenly made sense. They weren't trying to be involved parents. They were protecting their investment. If I married Daniel and started asking questions about finances, their 26-year con would unravel. That's why they'd been so critical of every choice, so determined to maintain control. They needed me to stay small, grateful, and financially dependent so they could keep stealing from the trust fund that should have made me independently wealthy years ago. I walked out of that office with copies of everything. Bank statements, legal documents, DNA tests proving Linda and I shared no blood, and 18 letters from parents who'd loved me more in death than my fake family ever had in life. But I didn't confront them immediately. Instead, I did something they'd never expect from the grateful daughter they'd created. I planned. For 3 weeks, I played the role they'd written for me. I smiled at their wedding criticism, accepted their helpful suggestions, and let them believe they still controlled the narrative of my life. Meanwhile, I was building a case that would destroy them in the most public way possible. Because if they wanted to steal my inheritance, gaslight my childhood, and purchase a fake sister to torture me with, they were going to face the consequences in front of everyone who'd watched them do it. My wedding day wasn't going to be their final victory. It was going to be their complete exposure. Tell me in the comments. Have you ever discovered that your entire life was built on someone else's lies? Because what I did next made sure they'd never lie to anyone again. The 3 weeks between discovery and wedding day were the most transformative of my life. Not because I was preparing to marry Daniel, but because I was preparing to bury the lies that had shaped me. Every interaction with Patricia and Robert became a performance. When they criticized my wedding dress as too expensive for someone in your position, I smiled and nodded while mentally calculating how many of my trust fund dollars had paid for Linda's designer wardrobe. When they suggested I tone down the reception because Daniel's family might think you're putting on airs, I agreed sweetly while remembering the Tuscany vacation home they'd bought with my inheritance. The hardest part was watching Linda. Knowing she wasn't my biological sister should have made her cruelty easier to bear, but it somehow made it worse. She'd been purchased specifically to make me feel worthless, and she'd played her role perfectly for 26 years. "I can't believe you're having such an expensive wedding," she said during the final dress fitting. "Some of us know how to be more practical with money." Practical. The girl who'd never worked a day in her life, whose entire existence had been funded by my stolen inheritance, was lecturing me about financial responsibility. But I just smiled. "You're right, Linda. Some of us do understand money better than others." She had no idea how true that statement was. I spent those weeks working with Mr. Harrison to freeze the remaining trust assets and prepare legal documents that would expose everything. We contacted the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, gathered evidence of wire fraud and identity theft, and prepared a case that would send Patricia and Robert to prison. But more importantly, I was reclaiming my identity. Reading my biological parents' letters, I discovered who I really was. Valentina Rosewood, daughter of artists, heir to a legacy of creativity and love. Not Valentina Chen, the unwanted burden who should be grateful for scraps. My real parents had been collectors of rare artwork, travelers who documented their adventures in journals they'd left for me. They'd been planning to teach me about art, culture, and the world beyond our small town. They'd wanted me to be confident, curious, and unafraid to take up space. Everything Patricia and Robert had tried to beat out of me. Daniel noticed the change immediately. "You seem different," he said one evening as we reviewed seating charts. "Stronger somehow." "I'm remembering who I was supposed to be," I told him. He didn't know about the inheritance yet. I wanted to handle the confrontation myself, but he could see that something fundamental had shifted. The woman who'd apologized for existing was becoming someone who demanded recognition. The night before our wedding, I sat in my childhood bedroom one last time, surrounded by the sparse decorations of a girl who'd been taught not to want too much. Tomorrow, I would walk down the aisle as Valentina Rosewood, not Valentina Chen. And when Patricia tried to steal from me one final time, she'd discover that the grateful little girl she'd created was gone forever. The morning of my wedding, I woke up as Valentina Chen for the last time. By evening, I would reclaim my real name, expose 26 years of lies, and watch the people who'd stolen my childhood face the consequences in front of 200 witnesses. But first I had to play my role perfectly one more time. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," Patricia said, adjusting my veil with the same hands that had forged my signature on trust fund withdrawals. "Your parents would be so proud." My parents? She was talking about Marcus and Isabella Rosewood, the people whose love she'd stolen along with their money. The irony was suffocating. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady. "I hope they're watching." They were. Through every letter I'd finally read, every photograph I'd finally seen, every truth I'd finally learned. My real parents were with me in ways Patricia could never understand. The ceremony was perfect. Daniel and I exchanged vows under a canopy of white roses, surrounded by friends who'd chosen to love us and family who'd. Well, we'd deal with that part later. When he slipped the ring onto my finger, I felt the weight of my real identity settling into place. But the reception was where my plan would unfold. I'd spent weeks orchestrating every detail. The seating chart placed Patricia, Robert, and Linda at the head table, close enough to the microphone for everyone to hear what was coming. I'd hired a videographer to capture candid family moments, ensuring everything would be documented. Most importantly, I'd invited Mr. Harrison as my family attorney, a detail that would become crucial very soon. The first hour went exactly as expected. Patricia held court, telling anyone who'd listen about her daughter's success, and how proud she was of the woman I'd become. Robert made jokes about finally getting me off the payroll, now that I was married. Linda complained about the centerpieces while photographing herself with my wedding flowers. Then Daniel's parents approached our table, beaming with pride. "Valentina," his mother said warmly, "we have something for you. A little wedding gift from our family to yours." She handed me an elegant envelope containing keys and documents for a custom Tesla, white with gold accents, worth more than most people's annual salary. The car was parked outside with a massive red bow, visible through the reception hall's floor-to-ceiling windows. "It's titled in your name only," Daniel's father added. "We wanted you to have something that was completely yours." The irony was perfect. After 26 years of having everything stolen from me, I was finally receiving a gift that couldn't be taken away. That's when Patricia made her move. "Oh, how generous!" she exclaimed loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "But you know, Valentina has never been much of a driver. She's always been so cautious about nice things." She turned to Daniel's parents with that practiced smile I'd seen her use to manipulate people my entire life. "Linda here is much more experienced with luxury vehicles. She'd really appreciate something like this. Wouldn't you, sweetheart?" Linda giggled, already reaching for the keys. "I mean, if Val doesn't mind sharing. I do have more experience with expensive cars." The audacity was breathtaking but not surprising. They'd been redistributing my possessions to Linda for decades. Why would my wedding day be any different? Daniel's parents looked confused and uncomfortable. Other guests were starting to stare. This was exactly the public humiliation I'd endured countless times before, except this time I was ready. "Actually," I said, standing slowly, "there's something I need to share with everyone before we go any further." The room began to quiet as I walked to the microphone. Patricia's face showed the first flicker of concern, but she probably thought I was going to give a gracious speech about sharing and family unity. She was wrong. From my purse, I pulled out the envelope I'd been carrying all day. Not just the car documents, but copies of trust fund statements, DNA test results, adoption papers, and 18 letters from my real parents. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the sound system, "I want to thank you all for being here to celebrate what I thought was just my wedding day. But it turns out today is also the day I reclaim my stolen identity." The room fell completely silent. Patricia's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. Robert's face went pale. Linda looked confused, like she was watching a movie she didn't understand. "You see," I continued, opening the envelope with deliberate slowness, 3 weeks ago, I discovered that everything I thought I knew about my life was a lie. And the people I called family have been stealing from me since I was 6 months old." I held up the first document, a bank statement showing millions in withdrawals from my trust fund. "My name isn't Valentina Chen. It's Valentina Rosewood. And these people aren't my family, they're my thieves." The gasps from the crowd were audible. But I wasn't finished. Not even close. The silence in that reception hall was deafening. 200 guests stared as I held up document after document, each one a nail in the coffin of Patricia and Robert's carefully constructed lies. "My biological parents, Marcus and Isabella Rosewood, died when I was 6 months old," I continued, my voice steady despite the magnitude of what I was revealing. "They left me a trust fund worth over $6 million, 3 properties, and a priceless art collection. I held up the trust fund statements, the numbers clearly visible to the front tables. For 26 years, the people I called Mom and Dad have been systematically stealing from that inheritance while convincing me I was a burden they graciously chose to keep. Patricia finally found her voice. Valentina, sweetheart, you're confused. This isn't the time or place. Actually, this is the perfect time and place, I cut her off. Because all of these people have watched you treat me like garbage for years while living off my money. They deserve to know the truth. I pulled out the DNA test results. Linda isn't even my biological sister. She was purchased 6 months after I arrived, bought from a teenage mother specifically to serve as a comparison point. Every kindness you showed her, every cruelty you showed me, was designed to keep me grateful and compliant while you robbed me blind. Linda's face crumpled. For the first time in 26 years, she looked genuinely shocked. That can't be true. It's all true, I said, holding up the adoption papers. You want to know why you got ballet lessons while I worked part-time jobs? Why you got family vacations while I stayed home? Why you got designer clothes while I shopped at thrift stores? Because every dollar spent on you was stolen from me. Robert stood up, his face red with anger and panic. You ungrateful little. Ungrateful. I laughed, the sound sharp and cold. I've been grateful for 26 years. Grateful for scraps while you fed Linda banquets bought with my inheritance. Grateful for a roof over my head in a house my trust fund payments helped buy. Grateful for the privilege of being psychologically tortured by people who were supposed to protect me. I turned to address the crowd directly. They told social services I was emotionally disturbed to justify larger withdrawals from my trust. They intercepted 18 birthday letters from my real parents. They convinced me I was worthless while living like royalty on my birthright. The murmurs from the guests were growing louder. I could see phones coming out, people recording what was becoming the most dramatic wedding reception in our town's history. And today, I continued, on my wedding day, they tried to steal one more thing. This car, gifted to me by my new in-laws, titled in my name only. They wanted to give it to Linda because she deserves nice things more than I do. I looked directly at Patricia, who was now crying. Whether from shame or fear of consequences, I couldn't tell. But here's what you never understood, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried through the entire room. I stopped being your victim the moment I learned the truth. And I've spent 3 weeks preparing for this moment. I gestured to Mr. Harrison, who stood up from his table. Ladies and gentlemen, this is my attorney. He's been working with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit to build a case against Patricia and Robert Chen for wire fraud, identity theft, and embezzlement of a minor's trust fund. Patricia's sobs became audible. Robert sat down heavily, his face gray with the realization of what was coming. The authorities will be here shortly, I continued. But I wanted all of you to witness this moment, the moment the grateful little girl you all watched them abuse finally got her justice. I folded the documents back into the envelope and smiled. Not the practiced, people-pleasing smile I'd worn for 26 years, but something genuine and fierce. Oh, and Linda. I turned to my fake sister, who was staring at me in shock. The car stays with me, along with everything else that was always mine. The room erupted in chaos, but I felt nothing but peace. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, media attention, and the strangest sensation I'd ever experienced. Complete freedom. Patricia and Robert were arrested at the reception. The sight of them being led away in handcuffs while my wedding guests watched was surreal, like the final scene of a movie I'd been trapped in for 26 years. The FBI investigation moved quickly. 26 years of financial records don't lie, and they'd been sloppy in their later years, assuming I'd never discover the truth. Wire fraud, identity theft, embezzlement of a minor's trust fund. The charges kept mounting. Linda disappeared the day after the wedding. No goodbye, no explanation, just an empty room and a forwarded address in another state. I felt nothing about her departure except relief. The fake sister who'd been purchased to torture me was finally out of my life. The media coverage was intense but ultimately liberating. Local woman discovers 26-year inheritance theft at own wedding became a national story. Suddenly, everyone wanted to interview the bride who'd exposed her fake family in front of 200 guests. But the most healing part wasn't the justice or the money. It was finally reading all 18 letters from my real parents. Each one revealed more about who Marcus and Isabella Rosewood had been. Artists who'd traveled the world, collectors who'd believed beauty could heal trauma, parents who'd loved me completely before I'd even learned to walk. "My darling Valentina," my mother had written for my 16th birthday, "by now you're becoming the woman we always knew you'd be. Strong, creative, unafraid to take up space in the world. Never let anyone convince you that you're too much or not enough. You are exactly who you're meant to be." Reading those words at 26, I finally understood what unconditional love looked like. The trust fund, once restored to my control, was worth over $8 million after years of compound interest. The properties included a stunning art studio in Santa Fe that my parents had planned to retire to. The art collection contained pieces they'd chosen specifically for me, works that celebrated resilience, transformation, and the beauty that emerges from surviving darkness. Daniel and I honeymooned in that Santa Fe studio, surrounded by artwork chosen by parents who'd loved me before they'd ever met me. For the first time in my life, I felt truly at home. Patricia and Robert received 5-year sentences for financial crimes against a minor. They'll be eligible for parole in 3 years, but they'll never be eligible for my forgiveness. Some people asked if I felt guilty about destroying their lives so publicly. The answer was simple. You can't destroy what was built on lies. They stole my inheritance, purchased a fake sister to torture me, and tried to steal my wedding gift in front of 200 guests. But when I pulled out that envelope, their 26-year con collapsed in minutes. Sometimes the people who claim to love you are the ones robbing you blind. DNA doesn't guarantee loyalty, and gratitude shouldn't be the price of basic human decency. The family you're born into isn't always the family you deserve. Your worth isn't determined by who claims you. It's determined by who you become when you discover the truth. The grateful daughter they created became the woman who destroyed their lies with documented evidence and perfect timing. If you've ever been made to feel grateful for crumbs while others feast on what should be yours, you're not alone. Subscribe to Boundless Revenge, where every story proves that the truth always surfaces and justice always finds its way.